do you want to go ahead and share the information of how you relocated, plant the Joshua trees?
Yeah, well, when they were doing all the construction in Yucca, like the Phelps site and then the Copper Hills housing tract expansion, and then a couple other projects, I moved trees to keep them from dying, keep them from getting bulldozed. So I moved almost 500 trees. I moved 320 trees from the Phelps site, the car dealership.
Yeah.
And out of those trees, out of all the trees I moved, I have 12 still living. I moved just under 500. And most of them stayed in the ground like 4 and 5 years before they finally died.
Yeah.
They didn't even know they were dead. And so I did some examinations. I was working with some guys from the University of Idaho who were here doing studies on the trees. Has led to this examination of whether or not the trees are going to go extinct. Those guys started the science trying to analyze the trees. We saw in our own experience just this year where we had the early spring, the trees all bloomed, but there were no moths. The little yucca moth that does the pollinating, so there were no moths. So the trees all bloomed, they didn't get pollinated, so there were no seeds. And all of the trees in my neighborhood, very few seeds were produced. And so what happens now? The moths hatched, and there were no blooms for them to feed on, and then to perpetuate themselves. So the seeds on the trees are gone, but there was more so the next generation of moths, which is even more critical because they're symbiotic. They only relate to each other. So you got the yucca moth that does the yuccas of the Joshua trees, any of the brevifolia, yucca brevifolia, yucca shedigra, those are our main yucca trees here. And then the yucca gigurana, which is more to the east and up on higher altitudes. But the moth is the key. And so if we disrupt by climate change, what's happening with the bloom, then we mess with the moths, which messes with the trees, and that symbiotic relationship gets upset, then you're only left with what, seeds are still viable, and unfortunately, in nature, they don't stay viable for long. I mean, you might be able to keep them in a vacuum and keep them viable for 20 years, they say. The seeds might sprout. But in a while, they don't.
Well, thank you for that information.
You're welcome.